In early 2024, Sarah Martinez found herself caught in what would become a landlord's worst nightmare. The trouble began when she inherited a modest two-story house from her grandmother at 1242 Maple Drive and decided to rent it out to help cover her own mortgage payments. After spending nearly $40,000 on renovations, she thought she'd struck gold with the perfect tenants, the Donovan family. The Donovans appeared flawless on paper. James Donovan's credit check came back clean, and his references couldn't speak highly enough of him. His wife Linda charmed Sarah during the home tour, and their two kids, Tommy and Emma, seemed well behaved. They had a convincing story about relocating for James's new tech job, and they didn't hesitate to put down first month's rent and security deposit. Looking back, Sarah would later tell investigators that everything seemed almost too perfect. The problems started almost immediately after they moved in, though no one recognized the red flags at first. Neighbors began reporting unusual activity within days, multiple cars coming and going at odd hours, people carrying furniture and boxes into the house well past midnight. The family's clean moving truck disappeared, replaced by a parade of beat-up vehicles. The immaculate lawn Sarah had invested in quickly showed signs of neglect, and window blinds were replaced with blankets and cardboard. What really caught the attention of local residents was how the household seemed to mysteriously expand. At first, it was just the family of four, reported next-door neighbor Tom Wilson. Then suddenly, we were seeing different faces in the windows every day. Nobody knew who actually lived there anymore. The original Donovan family vehicles ended up permanently parked on the street, while unknown cars filled the driveway on a rotating basis. When the first month's rent came due, the situation took its first serious turn. James Donovan's response to Sarah's routine payment reminder came 3 days late, filled with elaborate excuses about delayed paychecks and moving costs. His once professional communication style had completely changed, replaced with long, rambling messages promising payment was coming any day now. Every attempt Sarah made to schedule a property inspection was met with increasingly creative excuses. The property's deterioration accelerated rapidly. Security camera footage showed people entering and exiting through windows instead of doors. Cigarette butts began piling up on the front porch, and garbage bags accumulated beside the garage. Neighbors reported constant noise violations and construction sounds coming from inside. The smell of marijuana frequently drifted across property lines, leading to several complaints to local authorities. The final blow came in the form of an email from someone claiming to be James's legal representative. The message contained a detailed list of alleged violations of tenant rights, ranging from minor maintenance issues to serious accusations of landlord harassment. They were now officially refusing to pay rent until their demands were met, citing various California tenant protection laws. The security cameras Sarah had installed during renovation now captured a steady stream of strangers entering and exiting the property, but the original Donovan family was nowhere to be seen. Local law enforcement later confirmed that this was not an isolated incident. The Donovan family had pulled similar schemes in at least 3 other California cities, taking advantage of the state's tenant protection laws to effectively seize properties for months before moving on to their next target. Their method was always the same: present as a perfect family, pay the first month's rent to establish tenancy, then immediately begin gaming the legal system to maintain possession of the property without further payment. Sarah's first attempts at legal resolution revealed just how well prepared the Donovans were for this situation. When she filed for eviction in February 2024, she discovered that California's complex tenant protection laws would make removing the squatters far more difficult than she had anticipated. Her initial court filing was immediately met with a 50-page counter-complaint from the Donovan's legal representative, a document that local housing attorneys would later describe as professionally crafted to exploit every possible legal loophole. The Donovans' counter-complaint alleged everything from faulty wiring to mold problems, despite the recent $40,000 renovation and clean inspection reports. They submitted dozens of photographs of alleged issues, though many of which property inspectors would later testify appeared to have been deliberately created after the family took occupancy. They knew exactly what they were doing, commented veteran housing attorney Michael Brooks, who reviewed the case. They documented everything in a way that would maximize their legal leverage, even going so far as to file complaints with multiple state agencies simultaneously. Local police found themselves unable to intervene, explaining to an increasingly frustrated Sarah that this had become a civil matter the moment the Donovans established legal tenancy by paying that first month's rent. The responding officer's body camera footage captured their uncomfortable explanation. "Ma'am, we understand your frustration, but our hands are tied. They have established residency, and this needs to go through the courts." This would become a familiar refrain over the coming months. The situation grew more complicated when Sarah discovered she wasn't the Donovans' first target. Through a Facebook group for landlords, she connected with 3 other property owners who had eerily similar experiences with the same family in different California cities. Each case followed the same pattern: perfect rental application, prompt first payment, then an immediate descent into a legal quagmire that took months to resolve. "They're professionals," said Marcus Chen, a San Jose landlord who had dealt with the family 6 months earlier. "They know exactly how long they can drag out each step of the legal process." By March, the property's condition had deteriorated significantly. City code enforcement became involved after receiving complaints about unauthorized construction work inside the house. However, when inspectors arrived, they were met with sophisticated legal resistance. The occupants cited various tenant rights laws and refused entry without court orders, which would take weeks to obtain. The Donovans' legal representative submitted lengthy responses to every citation, effectively paralyzing the inspection process in procedural red tape. The financial impact on Sarah quickly became severe. While the Donovans occupied her property rent-free, she still had to pay the mortgage, insurance, and property taxes. Her attempts to document the growing damage to her property were met with harassment claims from the occupants, forcing her to stay away from her own property or risk legal consequences. "I was paying $2,800 a month for someone else to destroy my grandmother's house," Sarah recalled in her court testimony, "and there was nothing I could do about it." More disturbing details emerged as Sarah's attorney dug deeper into the Donovans' history. Public records revealed a pattern of similar occupations stretching back several years, with the family operating under various aliases. They typically targeted first-time landlords or recently inherited properties, knowing these owners would be less familiar with the complexities of tenant law. Their legal responses were consistently sophisticated, suggesting connections to what authorities would later describe as a larger network of professional squatters operating throughout the state. The local real estate community began taking notice of the case. The Regional Housing Association issued warnings to its members about the Donovans' tactics, but the alert came too late for Sarah. Property management companies in neighboring counties reported similar schemes, indicating that this was part of a growing trend of professional squatters who had learned to weaponize tenant protection laws. "These aren't desperate families looking for housing," explained housing rights advocate Janet Wong. "These are organized groups who have turned squatting into a business model, taking advantage of laws designed to protect vulnerable tenants." By April 2024, the impact of the Donovans' occupation had spread far beyond Sarah's property, turning a quiet suburban street into what neighbors described as a constant source of anxiety. The once peaceful Maple Drive community found itself dealing with problems they'd never experienced before. Security camera footage from multiple neighbors' homes documented a steady stream of suspicious activity, with unknown individuals coming and going at all hours. Local resident Diana Thompson, who lived 2 doors down, provided law enforcement with detailed logs of the disturbances. "We started seeing cargo vans pulling up at 2 or 3 in the morning," she reported. "They'd unload what looked like construction materials, but we'd never see any actual improvements to the house." The Neighborhood Watch Group documented license plates from over 30 different vehicles regularly visiting the property, though attempts to trace these vehicles often led to dead ends or false registrations. The physical transformation of the property was striking. Drone footage captured by a local news station showed makeshift structures appearing in the backyard, crude additions that clearly violated building codes. The once manicured lawn had been partially paved over to accommodate more vehicles, and satellite dishes appeared on every possible surface, despite the lease explicitly prohibiting such installations. It was like they were trying to make the property as unlivable as possible, noted building inspector Robert Martinez, no relation to Sarah, who viewed the property from public spaces but was denied entry for official inspection. The interior damage, glimpsed through windows and documented by concerned neighbors, was even more alarming. What appeared to be illegal electrical wiring extensions snaked out of windows, connecting to various outdoor equipment. The house's water usage had skyrocketed to 10 times the normal rate, suggesting possible illegal activities inside. When the city's utility department investigated, they discovered unauthorized modifications to the water meter, but legal restrictions prevented them from disconnecting service. Community tension reached a breaking point in May when several neighbors reported problems with their own properties that seemed to stem from the squatters' activities. 3 adjacent homeowners discovered water damage in their basements, apparently caused by the Donovans' unauthorized plumbing modifications. The local homeowners association attempted to intervene, but found themselves equally powerless against the squatters' sophisticated legal defenses. The situation attracted media attention when local news station KXTY ran a special investigation titled "Squatters' Rights Gone Wrong." The coverage revealed that the Donovans had developed a network of lookouts in the neighborhood, warning them of any approaching officials or inspectors. They had effectively transformed Sarah's grandmother's house into what one police officer privately described as a fortress protected by paperwork instead of walls. Sarah's financial losses continued to mount. Beyond the missing rent payments, property damage estimates from external assessments reached over $150,000. The Donovans' unauthorized modifications had compromised the home's structural integrity, and their legal team continued to file countersuit after countersuit, each requiring expensive legal responses. "They're not just squatting," Sarah's attorney explained to the media. "They're systematically destroying the property while using the legal system as a shield." The community's response began to evolve from concern to action. Neighbors organized fundraisers to help with Sarah's legal expenses, and local business owners offered pro bono services to document the damage. A retired judge living nearby provided valuable insights into navigating the legal system, and several real estate attorneys began collaborating on strategies to close the loopholes that the Donovans were exploiting. The case was becoming a rallying point for property rights advocates across the state, highlighting the need for legislative reform to protect legitimate landlords while maintaining necessary tenant protections. By June 2024, the Donovans launched what legal experts would later describe as a masterclass in manipulation. Their strategy shifted from merely defending their position to actively attacking Sarah's character and legitimacy as a landlord. They began by creating social media accounts supposedly documenting their nightmare landlord experience, complete with carefully edited videos and photos that painted Sarah as an aggressive property owner harassing a struggling family. Their social media campaign gained unexpected traction when several housing activist groups, unaware of the full situation, began sharing the Donovans' posts. James Donovan appeared in a series of TikTok videos that went viral, showing what he claimed were unsafe living conditions in the house, conditions that property inspectors would later confirm were deliberately created after they took occupancy. They were manufacturing evidence, explained social media analyst Patricia Chen. They would create damage, document it, then backdate their complaints to make it appear the problems existed before they moved in. The Donovans' legal team's investigation into their financial operations revealed a sophisticated money-making scheme. Evidence suggested they were subletting portions of the house to multiple occupants, collecting cash payments that were never reported. A former occupant, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that the Donovans were charging up to $500 per week for individual rooms while running what appeared to be unauthorized businesses from the property. They had turned the garage into some kind of workshop, the source reported. People were coming and going all day, but nobody knew what they were actually doing in there. Their legal strategy became increasingly aggressive. They filed a $2.5 million lawsuit against Sarah, claiming emotional distress, discrimination, and violation of their civil rights. The lawsuit named not only Sarah, but also several neighbors who had documented their activities, effectively trying to silence the entire community through legal intimidation. It's a form of legal terrorism, commented Housing Court Judge Rebecca Thompson, speaking about similar cases in general. They use the legal system not as a shield, but as a weapon. The Donovans operation showed signs of being part of a larger network. Investigation revealed connections to similar cases across 3 states, with evidence suggesting they were sharing information and strategies with other professional squatters. Their legal documents were nearly identical to those used in cases hundreds of miles away, indicating a coordinated effort to exploit housing laws on a broader scale. Most disturbing was their attempt to legitimize their position through local politics. They began attending city council meetings, presenting themselves as advocates for tenants' rights, while quietly working to block proposed reforms that would have made their schemes more difficult to execute. They even attempted to join the Neighborhood Homeowners Association, potentially to influence local property policies from within. Public records and investigation revealed that while they were refusing to pay rent to Sarah, the Donovans were maintaining multiple bank accounts with significant cash flows. Financial records subpoenaed during the legal proceedings showed deposits totaling over $180,000 during their 4-month occupation, suggesting their claim of financial hardship was yet another fabrication in their elaborate scheme. They're not struggling tenants, Sarah's attorney would later argue in court. They're running a business based on exploiting legal protections meant for genuine tenants in need. The turning point in the case came in July 2024, when a routine traffic stop 50 miles away unexpectedly connected to the Maple Drive situation. A police officer in Sacramento pulled over a van for expired registration, leading to the discovery of documents that would prove crucial to understanding the scope of the Donovans' operation. The vehicle contained multiple sets of falsified rental applications, credit reports, and what appeared to be a manual for exploiting tenant protection laws. This discovery caught the attention of the FBI's Real Estate Fraud Division, which had been monitoring similar cases across the state. What we found in that van was essentially a playbook, explained Special Agent Marcus Rodriguez. It detailed everything from how to identify vulnerable properties to scripts for dealing with law enforcement. This wasn't just opportunistic squatting, it was organized real estate fraud. The investigation accelerated when one of the Donovans' former associates agreed to cooperate with authorities. The informant, identified in court documents only as Witness A, provided detailed information about how the operation worked. They revealed that the Donovans were part of a larger network of professional squatters who shared resources, legal strategies, and even rotated through properties in different jurisdictions to avoid detection. Local law enforcement's approach to the situation changed dramatically once the FBI became involved. What had been treated as a civil matter was now part of a larger criminal investigation. Surveillance footage from neighboring properties, previously dismissed as irrelevant to the eviction case, became crucial evidence of organized criminal activity. The constant flow of vehicles and people through the property was no longer just a nuisance. It was evidence of what investigators suspected was a multi-state criminal enterprise. A breakthrough came when authorities managed to trace the Donovans' complex financial network. Banking records revealed a pattern of large cash deposits in multiple states, all carefully structured to avoid reporting requirements. The family that had claimed poverty in court documents was found to have over $400,000 spread across 12 different accounts. More importantly, investigators discovered they were simultaneously involved in similar schemes at 4 other properties across 3 states. The case took another turn when building inspectors, now backed by federal warrants, finally gained access to the property in August. What they found inside shocked even veteran investigators. The house had been methodically modified to maximize occupancy, with makeshift walls creating dozens of tiny living spaces. More disturbing were the signs of document forgery operations. High-quality printers, blank forms, and materials for creating fake identification documents were discovered in what had once been the master bedroom. The Donovans' sophisticated legal defense began to crumble when their attorney, facing scrutiny himself, withdrew from the case. Court records revealed he had represented similar squatter groups in multiple jurisdictions, suggesting he was more than just a hired lawyer. He was part of the operation. His withdrawal left the Donovans scrambling to maintain their legal shield just as multiple agencies were closing in. Evidence began to mount showing that their harassment claims against Sarah and the neighbors were entirely fabricated. Security footage from multiple sources proved that their documented confrontations with Sarah had been staged, often when she wasn't even in the area. Their social media campaign of victim narratives was exposed as a calculated effort to manipulate public opinion and pressure Sarah into a settlement. They were playing a numbers game, explained cyber forensics expert David Chang. They knew that if they created enough legal and social pressure, most property owners would eventually pay them to leave rather than continue fighting. The resolution of the Maple Drive case came swiftly in September 2024, though its repercussions would be felt throughout California's legal system for years to come. A coordinated effort between local police, FBI agents, and state authorities led to an early morning raid that finally ended the Donovans' occupation. The family, however, was nowhere to be found. They had apparently fled the night before, leaving behind a property that investigators described as methodically destroyed. The extent of damage to Sarah's property was finally fully documented. Professional assessors estimated repair costs at over $320,000, far exceeding the home's original renovation budget. They didn't just damage the property, noted forensic building inspector Tony Ramirez. They systematically compromised every major system in the house. The electrical system had been completely rewired, load-bearing walls were removed, and there was evidence they had begun undermining the foundation itself. Criminal charges were filed against James and Linda Donovan in multiple jurisdictions. The investigation had uncovered their real identities. They weren't even a married couple, but rather longtime associates in a criminal enterprise that had been operating across California, Oregon, and Nevada. Their actual names were Gerald McCarthy and Rachel Turner, both with previous convictions for real estate fraud in the early 2000s. The children who had appeared during the initial property viewing were apparently hired from a local acting agency, part of their elaborate scheme to appear as a legitimate family. The case prompted immediate legislative action. California State Senator Maria Rodriguez introduced emergency legislation dubbed the Safe Homes Act, aimed at closing the legal loopholes that professional squatters had been exploiting. What happened on Maple Drive wasn't an isolated incident, Rodriguez stated during a press conference. These criminals have been weaponizing laws meant to protect vulnerable tenants, and we need to stop them while still preserving legitimate tenant rights. For Sarah, the victory was bittersweet. While insurance covered some of the damage, she was forced to sell the property at a significant loss. The grandmother's house she had hoped to preserve as a family legacy had been so severely compromised that complete demolition was recommended. The hardest part wasn't the financial loss, Sarah told reporters. It was watching these people systematically destroy a place that had been in my family for generations, all while hiding behind laws meant to protect real families in need. The aftermath led to significant changes in how California handles tenant-landlord disputes. New verification systems were implemented to help property owners identify potential professional squatters before they could establish tenancy. The state also created a rapid response legal team specifically trained to handle suspicious occupancy cases, helping legitimate landlords avoid the months-long legal battles that had become common in such situations. The Donovans' network began to unravel across the country. By December 2024, authorities had identified over 30 properties affected by their operation and similar affiliated groups. The FBI's investigation expanded to include money laundering charges, as the group had apparently been using the squatting operations to funnel money from other illegal activities through the real estate market. Perhaps most significantly, the case sparked a national conversation about the balance between tenant protections and property rights. Housing advocacy groups worked with property owners associations to develop new guidelines that would protect vulnerable tenants while making it harder for criminal enterprises to abuse the system. The Maple Drive case showed us that we need both strong tenant protections and safeguards against abuse, noted housing rights attorney Jennifer Chen. It's not about choosing sides, it's about protecting everyone from exploitation. The Donovans themselves were finally apprehended in January 2025 while attempting to execute a similar scheme in Phoenix, Arizona. They now face multiple federal charges, including mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy, with potential sentences of up to 30 years in prison. Their arrest led to the discovery of detailed records implicating dozens of other individuals in their operation, triggering what the FBI described as one of the largest investigations into organized real estate fraud in recent history.